Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Wednesday edition of Locked On Guardians. I'm your host, Jeff Ellis. On today's show, we'll spend that much time, if you're listening, about a very small amount of time on the lockout, because really that's all the time that it seems the owners want to spend on it. After that, we're going to compare the relief core of the American League Central, and it's Wednesday. That means it is a Wednesday college wrap-up. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And I want to remind everyone, again, as a big thank you, this will be the Devil's episode 666 of Locked On Guardians. I've hosted all of them. It feels an appropriate one to have after everyone. Last night my hopes were up like everyone else's, and it was foolish because my hopes were up about this lockout, but at the same time, it seems rather silly. Why are the players going to accept what is being reported as on the 50-yard line, or not 50, on the 5-yard line? It's okay, so they're not, the tax rate is staying the same. They're getting minor increases. They're increasing the amount. It felt like very small gains for them. And of course, what happened today is the first two series of the season were canceled. I'm half tempted again. I want to remind everyone, go over and subscribe on YouTube. And you're like, I don't even watch things on YouTube. Fine, still subscribe. It helps us out. I've got my little travel map of all the stadiums I've been to. Should I put a little calendar and just start crossing off the games that are lost? It's disappointing. It is not surprising. You can go back to me vacillating on this point back and forth. But yeah, games are officially lost. Let's not fixate, though, on the negative. Let's move on to some positive things. I always encourage people over here at Locked On Guard. I didn't give my spiel. If this is your first episode, I am Jeff Ellis. Before being the host of Locked On Guardians, I was the lead draft and prospect analyst for Scout and 24/7. Through that, I developed I'm from Akron, born and raised in Northeastern Ohio, and that makes the draft kind of just an all-consuming passion if you're a Cleveland sports fan of about my age. So, of course, I was someone who, once they discovered how to follow the baseball draft, went down that rabbit hole. And that is part of the reason that makes the Wednesday wrap-up natural. I'm going to be doing following the college game for my own fun and entertainment. And with no baseball going on right now professionally, it seems the perfect time to talk about that. We often on the show also bring up, rate and review. It helps the show. We are at 99 ratings on iTunes. Next one gets us to 100. Thank you to John Meets, who put one out on 227. Very kind words, 5-star review. If you want to know, most of our reviews are 5 stars, and it's a tie for 4 and 1-star review. Sorry, everyone. My diabetic cat wants to join the show, and when you're a 14-year-old cat, you kind of get your way. But let's get over 100. Let's help the show, and again, subscribing is a big thing to help. But let's start talking about the Central. Let's talk about pitching in the Central. We talked about starting pitching on Monday. Let's get into the relief pitchers today. So I think the top pen is the White Sox, and that is, whether or not they keep Kimbrel, it's irrelevant. It's still going to be the top pen. Liam Hendricks is amazing. They added Kendall Graveman. Aaron Bummer is a really solid reliever. Garrett Crochet, if they keep him in the role he's in, is a flame-throwing lefty back there. I like Ryan Burr, who they got from Arizona. And they seem to always find more relief arms. This is a team that there's always another guy kind of coming down the pipe who could be down there. Matt Foster was good in that role a few years ago. I would not put it past him to rebound and be another successful relief arm for them. Maybe someone I talked about like Jimmy Lambert ends up back there. But yeah, this is the top pen. I don't think it's close. I don't think it's up for debate. They have the top pitching staff in the division in both starters and relievers. Number 2, this is where the debate happens for me. And it's either Detroit or Minnesota. And that maybe that's not what you expected, 2 and 3 to be. Detroit, Gregory Soto was very strong a year ago. Michael Fulmer, after I was like, why are they keeping him? Showed why. He was excellent in relief. Jose Cisneros throws really hard and gives a nice third option for the Tigers. And then on the Minnesota side of things, Taylor Rogers is one of the best closers in the American League. Tyler Duffy was effective. Cale Theobar was effective. Jorge Alcala. Help me out, Andy. What's the pronunciation there? And then, they can move some guys around. I'm probably going to go the Twins first because I think Rogers is the best of this grouping. And, Duffy was just awesome a year ago in that role. Now, both of them are older, so this is also a position. And with Theobar being 35, they may not hold on to this long. But I think it's the number 2 worst rotation, number 2 bullpen in the American League. That leaves us with the Tigers at third. Solid 3-headed monster. You're kind of curious to see if anyone else can step up into that role. I guess Funkhauser was decent last year. I'm just not all that enthused. I think he's more of a... Okay, so here's my rant. Back-end starters don't naturally make great relievers because you want relievers to have explosive stuff. A back-end starter is typically someone who has more average stuff. Putting him in the pen doesn't mean it's going to play up. So you're, like I've always said, I thought Eli Morgan worked in the pen because he's got a 65 grade changeup. And he's got a good enough fastball, so you have a plus pitch. That's why I think he could be effective. Funkhauser, he is built to be an innings eater. Maybe he'll be solid in that role. I'm not quite sold on it. And, Joe Jimenez is another interesting arm, not great a year ago. And they just have so many starters. We talked about I like that rotation quite a bit. They've got some more, young players of note, some interesting players that could come up and help them. I'm bullish. They're 3 now, but could easily be 2 by the end of the year. I think fourth you have to put Kansas City. Now there's the surprise, right? Scott Barlow is right up there amongst the top relievers in this division. It's Rogers, it's Barlow, it's Hendricks, and that's the thing. The closers in this division I will stack up with any division of baseball. Josh Staumont was someone I was never high on. He is more of a thrower than a reliever, but he's finally started to get things together. He's got some Emmanuel Clase. His fastball is up there near Clase A's, just in terms of velocity and stuff. Jake Brentz as a lefty was solid for them a year ago. They have the young players. We'll see who steps up, who gets a chance to start. We talked about Daniel Tillo on the show yesterday. Jackson Kowar, maybe they consider moving him to a pen role going into the future. Man, Richard Lovelady isn't even on their 40-man a year ago. I know I wrote him up as one of their top prospects. I'm trying to remember how high I put him as a relief-only player. I almost never put those guys high, but I really believed in his stuff. Kind of surprised. I know injured right now. We'll have to see some of these other young arms that could get a chance in their system, but I prefer their top 3 right now. That's the thing. It's Barlow, Staumont, Brentz. That's solid. Cleveland has Emmanuel Clase, who is as good as any closer in baseball. What he did a year ago is utterly fantastic. James Karinchak came utterly undone. Nick Sandlin has not remained healthy since he was drafted. And he's been hurt every single year, missed significant time a year ago. Anthony Gose is 31 and has had limited innings where he's been able to show any semblance of control. Trevor Stephan, we'll see. He's not getting that extra year of coaching. We were hoping to see what he could do with that time. Who else do you trust in Henches to take a step forward? I trust Clase, and after that, it's just question mark city. That is why, to me, Cleveland has the worst bullpen in this division. And that's why I have long said on this very show that bullpen is a sneaky need for the Cleveland Guardians. So again, if you missed out, top bullpen, Chicago White Sox. Kimbrel, no Kimbrel, still the top pen. I guess if I'm doing the YouTube imaginary line, that's 1. 2, I'm going to go with the Twins. I still like some more of the proven guys they have there. 3 are the Tigers, but with a good chance that they end up 2 before the end of the year. 4, Kansas City, because they've got 2 pitchers who looked really good a year ago, and then Cleveland, who has Clase, and then Sandlin's healthy for a full year. Great, he's your 8th inning guy. If what Ghost showed after returning from the Olympics last year, all of a sudden, they have Cleveland is 5. There's a strong chance they're 5 at the end of the year. There's also an outside chance they're 3 or even 2. They have the arms. Can Karinchak get it back together after sticky substances were taken away? A year ago at this time, I just said their top 2 could have matched anyone in the league. And early going in the year with some of the players they had, I just said they had the best bullpen in the American League Central through May of a year ago. But a lot of those guys came undone. A lot of those guys just did not pitch as well as the season continued going. So right now it's the worst. And let me know what you think. I put their rotation second best, right? Top of my head, trying to remember, I believe so. But the bullpen is fifth. Am I wrong? Am I crazy? Hit me up on Twitter at JeffMLBDraft. We're going to take our first break here and come back and do a Wednesday wrap-up with why maybe you want to pay more attention to the small school stats than the big school stats in the early going. I want to remind you to go check out our sponsor, Bet Online. Football might be over, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. For all the latest odds, totals, player performance, props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. Well, outside of this podcast, of course. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Go check out Locked On MLB Prospects with Lindsey Crosby. He took over for our old friend Aram, who's doing his thing. You know, when people go on, you just wish him your best. Lindsey and I are going to do some crossovers. We're already putting together. He's a very smart guy. He knows the business side of things as well, so you're going to want to go check that out. Good dude. We'll be chatting. I'm assuming he and I will do the draft content show again this year, because no matter what happens, the draft's going to happen. So, you know, we might have a lockout. You'll still get a draft. So let's talk about players who might be in the draft. And should we do the Tommy White alert? I feel like maybe, you know, last week I made a big deal, and for good reason. After 5 home runs in that first series, he had 4 more. So he's up to 9 on the year. That's a lot. In case you didn't know. Now, number 2 on this list, Brad Malm of Albany, New York. Now, I do want to talk about Brad Malm for a second. He's a senior infielder. Again, small school guy, so in the early going, I apologize, I feel like I just talked loudly there. You know, it's a situation where you might be thinking, well, you know, it's small school guys. We see these guys go out and perform, put up big-time numbers. He is a redshirt senior. You know, he's been bopping around since 2018 with this program. So, yeah, he's been there a while. This is 2022, so it's 5 years. He's been, you know, a high producer. Now, why I want to point this out, though, and why in some respects, like, his numbers are more interesting. He's got 8 home runs. Okay? So why you kind of want to look at a Brad Malm and be like, oh, big school versus small school. So most of his damage was done against UMES. Now, I will admit, when I went and I looked at it, I'm like, what is UMES? I was not familiar with the University of Maryland Eastern Shorehawks. That was a new program to me. They are currently 0-7. It has been a rough start for them. And they had 4 games against Albany. The reason, though, I'm bringing this up, and not to bury UMES, is the reason Brad Malm is still someone worth checking out. You're like, oh, he's a small school guy. Is because this is where, in the early goings, we talked about this with James Madison. When Chase DeLauder had that opening weekend against Florida State, he faced 2 potential day 1 pitchers. And he left that weekend with an OPS under 500. Faced some weak competition since then. His OPS is now over 1 again. Like, that's how much you can rebound statistically. Now, that's also like his last chance to really face that type of talent. So that's important. That stands out. But how about someone like Brad Malm, who in the opening weekend, who did Albany have? But Georgia. So, yes, he's got 8 home runs, but some of that damage was done against good pitching. It was done against the University of Georgia. He had a home run in the first game. Now, he faced Jonathan Cannon. Jonathan Cannon had a strong game. I mean, he had a good game. He just didn't miss as many bats as you'd like for a guy facing a lower-level competition. But Malm did damage against Georgia. Now, he did most of his damage against UMES, and you want to look at that stuff and pay attention. At the same time, like 3rd in the country in home runs is Hunter Duro for San Jose State. Now, he has faced University of Northern Colorado, University of Portland, and University of Nebraska at Omaha. Not to bring this kid down, he's got some chances coming up, you know, against New Mexico and some other University of California. Can he keep performing? Can he go out? You know, he's going to face University of Southern California. He's going to face Fullerton, UNLV. He'll get to face some programs that'll give him a chance to kind of show his stuff. But the fact that he is 3rd in the nation in home runs, and you look at who he's faced, that's something. Malm, again, the fact that half of his games in the early going were at Georgia, and that he's 2nd in the nation in home runs, that matters. That stands out. You know, I'm very high on Kevin Parada of Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech has produced a lot of great catchers, and he is the next one in line. If you went and looked at my big board, I didn't pull up the schedule, but I have him up there. But, he was a top 12 player when I say on my big board. He was a defense first catch. I mean, maybe it's not necessarily fair to say. He had a good bat. He looked like he could be an above average hitter and catcher. So they started out against Wright State. And you're like, okay, Wright State is a good program. Those are high scoring games. They won 9-8, 16-5, and 9-6. Well, after that, they had Georgia Southern, Presbyterian, and then Gardner Webb. And right now, Kevin Parada, who again I like quite a bit, is tied for 4th in the nation with 5 home runs. And you're like, oh, interesting. All of those came against Gardner Webb. So that is where, like, if you're a small school guy, this is the time that they're going to be performing. This is why you kind of want to go a little bit beyond the numbers. And again, small sample size. It's in some respects, I don't want to say meaningless. It is interesting to follow and look. But to understand, like, Brad Malm being 2, don't necessarily throw that away. Don't just be like, oh, he's at Albany. Realize that right now, Albany, yes, the second series wasn't as strong, but the first series was against ranked Georgia. And you need to see who the opponents are. Kevin Parada at 5, you're like, wow, 5 and 8 games for him as a catcher with, his defensive value and positional value. Again, I mean, I still think this guy is one of the top 12 players in the class, but you also have to look where those home runs are coming. You have to look at where things are balanced out and realize 5 gets you, like, interested, but it can't hold you right now. And it's going to be fun to see. I mean, you go down to 23rd, guys tied for 23rd with 3 home runs. You got guys like Dylan Beavers. You got Jacob Berry. You start getting into some more names that we have talked about in this draft class. So it's going to be fun to follow, something interesting to see. And we're also have this fun situation too now where I have to really pay attention. Like, I went to look up Caden Grice from Clemson because he's got 3 home runs. He's like top 5 in the country on base percentage. I remembered him as more of a pitcher, two-way guy. He's a first baseman, I want to say, for Clemson this year. But we're traditional sophomore. We have traditional sophomores again. It's been a while. So you also have to do that when you're digging through the data. There's some players who have been around for a long time. There's some other guys who are legit, just aren't, Dylan Cruz is probably the big name for next year's class, the LSU outfielder who early enrolled. But yeah, it's, you got to check it out. You got to see. And again, small school, we can't write off right now like you might later in the year because of the fact that this is when small schools face big schools. So Brad Malm, I mean, I'm not saying he's going to be a day 2, day 3. I'm not even saying he's going to get drafted. But I think there's value in the fact that he performed against Georgia. I think there is value in that, and that's something you want to check out and consider. We're going to take our second break. We're going to come back and talk about some pitchers that are excelling in the early going of the college baseball season. Let's take a moment and let's go over and check out our good friends at BuiltBar.com. You know them. You love them. Right now on sale, mint brownie. That is a solid flavor for them. It is a good one. They do mint very well. It's currently 15% off. That is, unfortunately, that's today only. So by the time you're listening to this, that won't be the sale. But the bigger point is there are sales like this happening all the time. And that's why you want to go to BuiltBar.com. You want to check it out. You want to see what's going on. You can get a Puffs mix box right now with coconut, which they always do super well, banana, which I love, and churro. Things like that are happening right now. A 12-bar mix box. What are their limited releases? You got the white chocolate cookies and cream, aka Oreos, ruby chocolate, lemon dip cheesecake, and caramel almond delight. There's always something fantastic going on at BuiltBar.com. And when you go there, remember to use the promo code LOCKED15. That is LOCKED15 to save 15% on your order. And I always tell you, you'll start building up those Built Bucks and you'll save even more. And I always use my Built Bucks, save like $5, use LOCK15, save 15%. And I am anticipating my new order to be here before the end of the week. That is BuiltBar.com. Remember, the promo code is LOCKED15. Save time and money while using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend $30, $50, or even 100% more for the same part from a chain store dealership? The example they always give us here is the Honda Odyssey fuel pump is $353 from the chain, $216 from Rock Auto. It's a family-owned business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. They cut down on the overhead to keep prices reliably low for all customers and pass that on to you. They have everything you could need, from brake parts to new carpet. And I always tell you, check out and see what's on rebate. And remember, if you are like me and you are not car savvy, go to rockauto.com and save yourself money on things like filters, your windshield wipers, those things that when you go to get your oil change, they try to upsell you on. No. You want to put those on yourself, and you can, and get those pieces and save even more money at rockauto.com today. When you go to rockauto.com, make sure in the little "How'd you hear about us" box, you write Locked On. You can say Locked On Guardians, Locked On MLB, some form of Locked On to let them know their advertising money is well spent. That is rockauto.com. Save yourself some money. I want to thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen, currently 3 days a week, wherever it is that you get podcasts, always free, always available. That is Locked On Guardians. And I want to thank you again to everyone who downloads daily, rates and reviews, and subscribes on YouTube. I appreciate that. Help the show out. We're at 32 subscribers. Let's see that number grow. If you enjoy the show, it's a simple thing you can do. Just subscribe on YouTube or subscribe anywhere and everywhere. And I just want to thank those who have and those who will. So let's talk about some pitchers. So last week we talked about Bryce Hubbart, and part of the reason I talked about him and not his teammate was he had more strikeouts, and he was also the Cape strikeout king, and I've talked a lot about how that has been a springboard. I mean, for every pitcher I can recall in recent memory. And now after 2 weeks, the person leading the nation in strikeouts, well, Bryce Hubbart is currently fourth. At number one, his teammate, Parker Messick. Parker Messick is kind of a great story. I was curious. I'm like, I feel like I knew him from high school. Obviously not when I went to high school. Anyone I went to high school with who could do sports is long retired. But, he went to Plant. That is a big program. At the same time, when I went to look up his perfect game stuff, he was like the 12th rated left-handed pitcher in his own state. So that's, quite a thing for him. It's good on him, essentially. And he has been a solid starter for Florida State from pretty much the drop for them. And he has performed well. We talked about against James Madison. He chased a louder in that game, went 1 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. Messick went 5 2/3. He allowed 1 run on 2 hits, 2 walks, and he struck out 11. Now, last week they faced Samford. Samford is a solid program. It's, Sonny DeChara. I was looking at his stats today. I didn't realize he had gone to Auburn. He was kind of their big bat. It's not the strongest program. It's a smaller program. Let's just be honest and say that and move through. But still, 7 innings, 1 hit batter, 13 strikeouts. He gave up that hit in the first inning. He hit a batter in the 5th, and that's all that reached base in that matchup against Samford. He was dominant across the board. He just totally shut them down. 85 pitches for those 13 strikeouts over 7 innings. He's a 6-foot-tall lefty. He keeps this up. He will certainly be a pitcher on the Guardians' watch. He's, 23 strikeouts to 2 walks so far. That's pretty darn good. And then the other player who's certainly on the Guardians' watch, who to a T fits their pitching style, is Hunter Barco at Florida. Now, if you listen to this podcast, a year ago I talked about the Guardians took 3 pitchers out of Florida. Allman, Leftwich, and Tommy Mace. What was interesting is Leftwich and Mace both had very disappointing college careers. For where they were supposed to come and what they were supposed to develop, it did not come together for them. So I kind of viewed it as, is this program being rated a sign of respect or a sign of we see things we can easily fix? I'll leave that up to you. But the top pitcher there is Hunter Barco, who a few years ago, I feel like in my way too early mock draft, I put him as the number 1 high school pitcher as a lefty. He's gone to Florida. He's performed well. There's some talk that the fastball is a little flat, that there's this and that. And we also have to admit, he is currently number 2 in the nation with 22 strikeouts. He has faced lesser competition. He has faced Liberty, who's most known for their Celine Dion uniform reveal, and then Georgia State. But let's still talk about what Barco's done in those 2 games. Against Liberty, 6 innings, 1 hit, 1 walk, 11 strikeouts, 88 pitches needed to get through 6 innings. Then on the other side of things, when you go to that Georgia State game, he goes 6 innings again, strikes out 12, 3 hits, 1 earned run, 1 walk. So he's been excellent. And he is tied, or not, is he tied? Yeah, he's tied for second in the nation in strikeouts with Austin Peterson of UConn. Barco, I talked about it a lot before the year even started, that this is a guy who very much feels like a Cleveland Guardians type of pitcher. High strikeouts, low walks, plus we know they have scouted Florida heavily. So, yeah, I think he's someone you have to consider and look at. And Parker Messick, again, he also fits what they like, what they're looking for, what they're going for, and both are draft eligible this year. In terms of who else is missing bats, well, there's also Bryce Hubart, the teammate who's tied for fourth. Talked about Austin Peterson, also from big schools, Chase Dolander from Tennessee, who I believe was a transfer. Corey Lewis is the next guy from UC Santa Barbara in that continual pipeline of pitching after McGreevy a year ago and Shane Bieber a few years ago. We'll see who else can continue to step up and stand up. It's early on. For a lot of these top-end guys, they've had 2 starts. It's going to be important to see what they can do over many, many more starts. Seeing what happens when guys like Messick and Barco aren't facing the cupcakes, seeing if they can continue to still rack up the strikeout numbers. It's certainly something to pay attention to. And I know what you're thinking. He's only looking at strikeouts and home runs. In the early going, there's not too much else to go on besides those. And those are limited things. I did go and look at who's leading the, both leagues in strikeouts. Not strikeouts. I already talked about that. Who's got walks? Who's walking at a high rate? Joe Kinker of FGCU, Sky Duff of Pittsburgh, Caden Grice of Clemson, who we talked about, is up there with a lot of walks. Jace Jung tied for 5th in walks if you want a high-end prospect. I looked at pitcher walk rate. Well, there's a lot of guys who haven't walked anyone, including University of Akron's Anthony Fett, keeping it local. Ohio University, Joe Liberatore? Gonna have to go look up the first name. There are some local guys I've talked about in terms of who to check out as well. But we're going to continue seeing who's performing, who's standing out, who is putting themselves on the radar. And with the Cleveland Guardians in particular, this is a Cleveland Guardian-centric podcast. We know that they let their scouts know a year ago, hey, if you can get a job, take it. They're cutting back on scouting department. They're going more analytical model. They're using, their own approaches of what they have found success. And we talked about the ZiPS projection Monday. In some ways, they're doing a ZiPS projection type of deal for a lot of college scouting. And that is why we saw them go for a very specific type in last year's draft class. And that is a type they've had success with. We know what they do well with. They know what they do well with. And we're going to see them target those type of guys. That's why Hunter Barco, Patrick Messick, keep them in mind. They fit the profile very much. I talked about, I would love it if Chase Delader fell. He's not really their style. He could be there at 12, and there's not 12, are they at 13? I can't remember the pick off the top of my head. But they might pass. He is not their approach. And they seem to be very much a team that is sticking to their approach of success. So, just something to keep in mind. Again, I want to thank everyone for listening, rating, and reviewing, downloading, subscribing, all that great stuff when it comes to Locked On Guardians. I have been your host, Jeff Ellis. I'm messing around with the sound since I'm using new software, since we are now a video and audio podcast. Let me know how it's going. I feel like I'm having problems with some of the gain and stuff like that, so I'm trying to adjust and move things around. Let me know how it sounds. As always, feedback is appreciated. I have a never-closing mailbag. We want to keep filling that mailbag up, so when it comes time to do a mailbag, it is nice and full, and I got plenty of things to answer, so hit me up on the Twitters at JeffMLBDraft. And as we end every show now, go Guardians, go.